First, to establish the probabilities of the two rows as to whether anthropogenic global climate change is true or not, we looked at a bunch of sources. These sources on this side essentially said that anthropogenic global climate change is true, and it's a problem, and the sources on this side said that anthropogenic global climate change is false, or not a problem. If you remember our credibility spectrum, which I proposed, running from less credible all the way up to more credible, starting at the bottom with the lay individual. More credible than that is the professional individual. More credible than that probably is think tanks, and then somewhere in there is university programs and petitions and statements. This is all sort of mixed up, not sure which is higher than the other. Then peer-reviewed is definitely higher than these, peer-reviewed science. And finally, I feel pretty confident to put at the top statements that contradict the normal bias of the organization or person making the statement, and professional organizations at the top. So on this side, we've got the two professional organizations, AAAS and NAS, and an organization contradicting its own bias, an organization of heavyweight industries, USCAP, coming out saying global climate change is caused by humans and is a problem. We also have an author down here that I mentioned briefly, Fred Pierce. On this side, we don't have anything up here. We got a bunch of individual, professional individuals, scientists, and authors down here. Michael Crichton, State of Fear. Now it may seem odd, with all the shouting going on, there's so much blank space on either side here. That's because I just tried to put the things that weren't canceled out by the other side, the things that were different. For instance, we've got sources on this side, on this end of the spectrum, but we don't have them over here. If you want to put things in here, like there's a ton of stuff from think tanks, but if you want to put in Cato and AEI and Heritage and the Hoover Institute, then you're going to have to grant stuff from the Environmental Defense Fund and NRDC and Sierra Club, etc. So that we can pretty much just, instead of cluttering up a board, we can just call those a wash. Same thing with university programs, petitions and statements, and peer-reviewed science actually is weighted way more towards this side than this side, but I didn't want to complicate things even more. So this could be much larger, but I just wanted to simplify it and acknowledge that there's a ton of stuff on both sides at each level, but pretty much it cancels out and we just look at the big differences. These down here are actually outweighed by professional individuals on this side, but I put them here because they are the names that you're going to see most often. They're really the only people out there who are at all credentialed, who are countering the statements from AAAS and NAS. Other than them, all you got is think tanks and bloggers. That's not true. Other than them, you got think tanks, you got bloggers, you got petitions and statements. You just have very little peer-reviewed, and you got, as far as I can find, no professional organizations or statements from organizations contradicting their own bias. If you can find it, let me know. And I don't think I cherry-picked. If you can find some stuff up here for this side, please let me know. So I don't think I've stacked this because of my bias. This is what I found, and because of what I found, it leads me to the conclusion that this row is way more likely than this row, way more probable, which we can represent by moving this line up. Now, I want to be clear, that doesn't mean that it's going to happen. I don't know the future any better than you do, or Nostradamus does. No one knows what the future's gonna hold. We just speak about probabilities. And it sure as heck seems, from looking at that diagram, stacking up the evidence, stacking up the credible sources on both sides, it seems pretty much irrefutable that this row is more likely, more probable than this row. Now, in terms of consequences for our expected value, we decided to not worry so much about the range of possibilities in each box and simply accept the feasible worst-case scenario for each. Up here, we've got reduced GDP growth and all that ripples out from that. Down here, we've got what seems to be an almost Mad Max world. We've stacked up Lomborg's 4 Nobel laureates versus the Economist statement on climate change's 6 Nobel laureates, called it a wash, as well as showing that any negative economic consequences up here are not only included, but made worse down here by natural disasters. And we've deferred looking at the details behind the physical consequences here to the video, How It All Ends, Scare Tactics. Now for the hard part. We've got a basic idea of probabilities and a basic idea of consequences. Now we need to come up with some actual numbers for the probabilities and the consequences in order for us to then do the expected value calculation that you saw us do in the sample gambling problem. Except, lucky for us, we don't have to come up with numbers because we've just hit upon a special case of expected value. We've established that both the consequence and the probability of this box are greater than this box. And if you go back to our original gaming example, you'll see that in cases such as that, we don't even need actual numbers in order to know which expected value will turn out to be larger. Play with it and you'll see that no matter what the exact numbers are, if both the probability of this and the consequence of this box is greater than the probability and the consequence of this box, the expected value of this column will necessarily turn out to be larger than this column. Now remember, in this application, the expected value we're talking about is a bad thing because it represents our suffering, not how much money we're going to get like it was in the gaming example. So we would definitely be betting against the odds and against our own rational self-interest to pick this column because its expected value of suffering is necessarily greater than this column, probably much greater. Remember, this is how casinos and insurance companies do business. They've got it figured out. Why should we ignore such a successful tool when betting on the future of the planet? I mean, us. Now, I want to be completely intellectually honest with you because stuff like that Heritage Foundation article I mentioned earlier just really ticks me off, and I don't want to even be accused of stooping to their level. So to avoid being like them, I want to tell you that for the sake of accessibility, I did a little sleight of hand right there with the expected value calculation, or the estimate. I don't see how it could change the conclusion, but then I'm only human and I could be wrong, so maybe it could change the outcome. And you shouldn't believe anything I say anyway. Check it out for yourself. But here's the deal. Really, the expected value of a column should be the sum of the expected value of both boxes in that column. And we only looked at the worst case scenarios in each column. We only looked at the expected value of this box versus this box. Really, what you should do is take the expected value of this box plus the expected value of this box. That becomes the expected value of the whole column. Same thing over here. Then you compare the expected values of the columns. I don't see how it would change the answer, but if that simplification doesn't do it for you, and you want the complexity, then go watch the video, How It All Ends, the Man-Paula Project, where we will explore that further.